Good evening. Welcome. My name is Kevin Rose, and this is the second in a series of Bar Cart Co-op specials co-hosted by Alan Bishop and myself. Before we get started, I want to wish everybody a happy Bob Dylan's birthday. So, some point during the evening, we'll raise a glass to Lucky Wilbury himself. So, first of all, just a little bit of housekeeping items. Let me introduce you to the Bar Cart Co-op if you're not familiar with us. It is a collection of shows who share the goal of providing authentic, creative, and fun content for the whiskey enthusiasts. We've got Distillers Talk, hosted by Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. We have My Whiskey Den, which airs on Monday nights at 9 o'clock Eastern with Patrick and Mike and Benjamin. And then my show is Bourbon Turntable, hosted by myself and Drew Crawley. We have new shows that drop every Wednesday, including tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. You'll get to hear us talk about a review of the new Black Keys album and talk about a couple of new rye whiskeys that we have been trying lately. So without further ado, we're going to get started. We have the privilege tonight of listening in on a conversation with three talented and innovative distillers on the topic of non-traditional grains in whiskey. So we'll go around the horn and introduce each of our panelists. We'll start with Don from Dry Fly.
Hey, thanks for having me on. My name is Don Poffenroth. I'm the founder, CEO of Dry Fly Distilling. CEO is a precarious term in the world of small distilling, but it sounds super cool. So we're going to hang with that. Dry Fly is in its 15th year of its existence, so we're still here. It's all good.
It's impressive.
15 years is very impressive. Very impressive. All right, Kris from Golden Beaver.
Well, I'm Kris from Golden Beaver. I'm the managing partner and head distiller here, and we are in our third year here in Chico, California.
Chico, California. Welcome, Kris. Thanks for being with us. And last but certainly not least, the alchemist himself, Alan Bishop. Welcome, Alan.
Certainly least attractive of this gang, that's for sure. I mean, I got I don't have a forehead. I've got an 8 head. You could land an airplane on that thing. Good Lord. Anyways, my name is Alan Bishop. I am the head alchemist at Spirit the French Lick in French Lick, Indiana. Southern Indiana, maybe about an hour and 10 northwest of Louisville, Kentucky. We've been in operation since 2016. We focus on a lot of alternative grains and alternative yeasts. I talk a lot about distilling, and I'm pretty much anywhere that anybody will give me a platform. So this will be a fun show for me too. Worked with Kris in the past, obviously Kevin, but Dry Fly is new to me. I've obviously heard of them, but I don't think I've ever had a chance to try their stuff until now. So I'm excited about that.
Yes, this is fun. This will be very fun. Format for the evening, just so everybody kind of has an idea of where we're headed. We'll talk with each of the distillers we've got with us, and they'll tell us a little bit about their whiskey, what makes it unique in terms of the grains that they use, the mash bills. And then while they're doing that, the rest of us will be trying the whiskey that they're going to be talking about. And then we'll give an opportunity for Kris and Alan and Don to go back and forth and talk with each other about what they see and taste in their whiskey and ask questions. So it should be a really fun time. So we will start with Don and Dry Fly. And this is what we will be sampling this evening. We have this 3-year-old straight triticale whiskey. So Don, tell us what we've got here, and especially tell us what triticale is and how you came to use it.
Happily. So when one of the primary things for us at Dry Fly was to be very agriculturally based. So all of our grains that we use in our facility are grown within 30 miles. They come from 2 primary farms. And each one of those farms is in excess of 100 years old, still owned by the homesteading families. And a lot of decisions we make at Dry Fly are based upon the grain. And to us, it is more important to be sometimes local than maybe traditional. And that really is the story of triticale. We grow no rye in the state of Washington. A ton of wheat is grown here, all dry land farming. rye is a weed, and if anyone has ever been working as a kid in a wheat farm, what you did is you went in the summer and pulled rye. It was a grain that overwinters, meaning that the seed, can last multiple years in the ground. So wheat farmers, rye is sort of a cuss word. We wanted to develop those flavors and got to be connected with a company called Spectrum Seed Development, and worked on triticale. A little bit of triticale was being grown in Washington primarily for feed. Triticale is sort of like super wheat. It's a hybrid of wheat and rye. The word triticale comes from the Scottish words triticum and cicale, which are the words for wheat and rye. So it's a hybrid of those things. And we worked with Spectrum to get a multitude of seeds in from Scotland. We're fortunate to have Washington State University here, which is a agricultural grain college for sure. They test plotted for us. We went through the process of doing small batch distillation and determining kind of what seed variety we liked. And I think we tried 6 or 8. I can't honestly remember. It was a long time ago, but ran those through and ultimately picked one seed variety, one seed number, for lack of better terminology, and built Triticale whiskey. So it ultimately came out of necessity from a growing standpoint. That being said, it's probably one of the things I'm most proud of, because we took it from 0.0 all the way to the top. And I don't think anyone in the world, quite honestly, had ever made a straight Triticale whiskey prior to us doing that. And we've been doing it now for 10 or 12 years in totality. Still one of my favorite whiskeys. It's I call it a super wheat. It's a wheat with just a little more attitude.
It's very interesting stuff. So guys, Kris, Alan, first off, do you have any thoughts on the whiskey that you've been drinking here?
Yeah, absolutely. I already had to pour glass number 2. I'll start there. This tastes exactly like what I wish rye or wheat whiskey, either one, tasted like, is what it tastes like. It's fruity, but there's also a minerality there. There's almost a dryness at the back of the palate after that fruit comes in. At the very back, it kind of finishes dry, almost like a Chambourcin wine or something like that, where that minerality starts to really come through. You get some of those. I don't really know how to explain them, but like in wheat, to me, it's almost always like that sort of brand sort of characteristic that you get from wheat and wheated bourbons. You get some of that, but it's more assertive. It's more, it's less earthy and more kind of on the grains of paradise spectrum, in particular, which I really, really enjoy. And I love how clean it finishes. It's not a whiskey that lingers and lingers and lingers. But I like that. I like that it's almost like a palate cleanser itself, to where you're focusing on that big fruity note, that sort of grains of paradise, and then that minerality coming in there as well. I'm going to be finding a way to purchase more of this 100%. There's no way I'm not.
I think it's super cool. And again, since we took it from the grain perspective, which I think was very interesting, not that we planned it that way, it was just necessity. Kind of the mother of all invention, but it allowed us to really get into that variety, because not all tequila can make whiskey, and we definitely learned that lesson. I think in the U.S. there are somewhere around 99 seed varieties that are grown for triticale, and like I said, we kind of ended up with one that we really liked. It actually was seed number 99. Not that we had to go through all 99, but just in our distilling luck, for lack of better terminology. I like this. I think wheat whiskey, and we started making wheat whiskey, again, being very in tune with our farmer. Is this, I call it starter whiskey. It's like a soft, mellow way to transition into whiskey. And this just takes it up a notch and adds a little bit of that kind of spiciness, that pepper tone of rye into that equation. And it, like you said, Alan, it takes the sweet side of wheat and kicks it in the butt on the backside a little bit.
Yeah, it drops a little that to me a lot of times like wheated bourbons or wheat whiskey either way a lot of times can have a little bit that like cream cheese icing sort of thing.
Yep.
And there is that sweet note here, but it's not sort of like cloying like what wheat can be occasionally, you know. It's got enough of a break with that, again, sort of grains of paradise and that minerality that it's almost like it cleanses its own palate as you drink it and as you try it, which I find really interesting. And texturally, it's cool too. So it's got a good mouthfeel, but then you get that grains of paradise thing kind of comes in, and again, it changes everything. It's I've never really used that term about whiskey. I've heard people say it, but it definitely has that sort of chewy sort of factor to it, right? That it makes you want to have that sort of visceral reaction as though you're reacting to food as opposed to drink.
Really interestingly enough, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but when we first made that whiskey and the first batch came out, obviously in typical distiller fashion, you kind of sent it out for third-party verification, and we had a fairly well-known person taste the whiskey and described it as, it reminded him of his favorite breakfast cereal. And our question was, which cereal is it? I mean, is it, Captain Crunch, or is it, Fruit Loops? Which one is it? Which we never got an answer to, but nonetheless.
So is this a pot still or column?
So we, our equipment is from Christian Karl out of Göppingen, Germany. We've always bought equipment from them. So we have columns, but we distill this alambically. So we strip it alambically. Our current pot still, we just moved into a new facility, is 5,000 liters, so it's fairly large. And we ferment on the grain. We fairly traditional distilling, strip and then finish. And we've learned with the big still, it takes a long time.
Yes, absolutely. Any particular yeast strains or anything like that you can kind of get into or talk about?
All of our yeast strains come from fermentus, and actually our whiskey yeast strain we developed with them. And that sounds like I'm a super knowledgeable yeast guy. Quite frankly, I took a number of yeast varieties and blended them together, came up with my own blend, and use that for all of our whiskey except for single malt. We have a very traditional single malt whiskey yeast that we use, and then obviously use different yeast for our white spirits as well.
Very cool. Yeah. Impressive.
Yeah, it's fun stuff. I mean, 15 years of distilling have taught me a few things. They've taught me to be humble and kind, and appreciate when people appreciate, and ignore when they don't. So this is a thick-skinned business, and especially today with everyone having an opinion on everything, makes life interesting for sure.
Yeah.
On the nose on that, and I'll be the first. I'll admit right now, my sinuses are a little bit off, so nobody else gets this. I'm going to understand completely. But there's like a slight, just very, very, very slight caraway characteristic, kind of in the background of that I really like a lot. It's super subtle, but.
We use all 53-gallon oak, all Independence Dave. They've been our supplier of oak forever. So middle of the road oak. I mean, we don't press it. I always think in whiskey distillation, and I'm sure y'all would agree that it is the sum of 1,000 decisions.
Right.
And when I try to walk people through the distillery, I talk to people about whiskey. I talk about the fact that there are a million different ways every variable can go. And when I learned distilling, I built a distillery before I'd ever distilled a drop in my life, which is maybe not the way to do it. But I was a marketing guy, came out of the food industry, had confidence in my growers, had confidence in the farmers in our area, and knew that I was buying equipment from a 175-year-old company that was pretty dang good at that. So I just had to connect the two dots, and I asked the Karl guys. I always call them the House of Karl. I asked the House of Karl to develop, distillery equipment for dummies, and then we kind of eked our way through it. But they would always talk about, Don, you have a decision. You can do this, this, or this, and I was like, I just spent a whole lot of money. I just have to make something. So I'm not going to go through your 52 steps. I'm just going to make a decision and go. And
Right.
luckily that's worked out okay. And I think we made some good decisions along the way and didn't have to bob and weave a lot. But I mean, that's definitely part of the equation. And every other thing is a variable. I mean, we're super intense on grain, and we send every crop year out to get analyzed. We match that data against the previous year to kind of adjusting our mash sequencing as we go based upon moisture content or starch content or other variables. And that's kind of how we play the game. We don't change a whole lot. We try to keep it as consistent as we can.
You've definitely done a great job of representing the agriculture there, I think. I mean, as far as that, those positive attributes of the grain holding up to the maturation as well. You know, you can still tell that there's something different about this whiskey, you know, that the grain is there, it's prominent, it's all the positive attributes thereof, and it's well balanced with that oak as well.
Thank you. And I think the other thing we do too is probably which is not incredibly efficient, if we were to be honest about it, is we take very narrow cuts in whiskey. We typically cut a fairly narrow band, and I guess our initial philosophy was that we'll put the best possible spirit in the barrel, and then we can ask the barrel to add character that doesn't have to take care of defects, and that's played well for us. And we've got away with having, a 3 or 4 year old product that I think sometimes shows beyond its age.
Yes,
definitely. Are you redistilling your faints?
Definitely.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Are you redistilling your faints?
We are not, to be honest with you.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very similar to the old 55 thing, Kevin.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Taking just the heart of the hearts and not redistilling any of the faints or anything.
Yeah, that was probably born more out of the fact that we didn't have time, and before we moved into this new facility, we existed our first 14 years in a 5,000 square foot facility. Our new facility is 19,000 square feet. So we have more room. The end of our life in our old facility, we moved 25 pallets every day out in the backyard and then back in the building at the end of the day because we didn't have room. And we probably made some decisions on that we ultimately just didn't have time to pursue that. And it's become who we are. So that's where we live.
Yeah. So this sample that you sent is aged at 3 years. Do you have any of this stuff that you're letting go any longer? Or are you finding that it holds up longer? Or it doesn't hold up any longer than 3 years?
It holds up quite nicely. The other thing we've done with this whiskey, and I think it takes a finishing barrel very well, is we've done some port finish versions of this, which is a cool project that I think we were the first small distilleries to really play that world. It's because of some winery friends. And then we have a really cool project we do with breweries, not to give all of our secrets away, but we typically, obviously, you use a barrel one time, it goes to a brewery. They do barrel aged beer. I'm taking those barrels back and putting whiskey back in them again and moving that circle and then giving it back to the brewery again. And that can, I think, go on forever. I think it's a really fun thing to do. So I think we have 8 or 10 breweries we do that with.
That's great.
We have a question from the chat. What type of charger do you use on barrels, and is it standard white oak?
It is all American oak. Again, number 3 char. Typically, we do take the head toasting slightly different, but nothing crazy. And honestly, that's been the barrel we've used since the day we started. Why do we do that? Because 3's in the middle.
Chris, what are you thinking?
No more intense thing than that.
Yeah.
No, it's a very pleasant distillate. It's a very nice whiskey. I'd like to see it in a Manhattan. I think for a lot of ladies who shy away from a true rye Manhattan, this would be a nice alternative. It's got a very nice nose on it, and it's got a great palate. So
thanks, Chris. That's a great input. We have
I'm gonna call in my bartender in a minute and ask him to go make one, and we'll test out the theory.
Nice, I like it. In our new facility here, we added added. Like, this is the insanity of the distilling business. But we're right in the middle of downtown Spokane. Our building used to be the printing press building for the city of Spokane. So this building has a 750 pound per square foot floor load, which is nirvana for distilling. We have loading docks now, which are things we never had before. It's all the little things you happen in small distilling that you just giggle over. But we have an 80-seat pub here and a 50-seat event space area here. By far, we sell triticale old fashions probably 4-to-1 over any other cocktail we sell in this building.
Might try back sweetening this with a little honey.
Yeah.
To make your old fashions, because it's got those nice components to it. So that's very good.
It's been a really fun project. I mean, anytime you can kind of do something from the ground up, no matter what it is, it's pretty dang fun.
Yeah. The as we like to call them, the fat guy tasting note that I have on this is apple butter on wheatberry bread, on wheatberry toast.
I can see that.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting barrel. You do a little apple brandy finish on there would be kind of cool.
Yeah. So many ideas, so little time.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I know where you can get a barrel of apple brandy from, though.
Yeah.
I bet I know a guy get you an empty apple barrel.
You think you know a guy?
I think it's worthy of an experiment.
Right.
So it sounds like your approach is very scientific. Is that a fair statement?
I'd say I'm probably the least scientific person I know. Maybe I've had to learn how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I probably also, and Kris knows this as well, I probably have learned how to be part electrical engineer, part mechanic. I was probably a fair mechanic before that, but definitely have taken that to a new level. Part conflict resolution guy. You wear many hats when you're a small distillery person, and we have 34 employees now. It's insane.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah, I wish I only had 24. It'd be way easier. I love all those guys, but man, it's a lot of work.
If you know how to fix a boiler, I know some people that would like your number.
It's a really interesting story. When we built our new facility, we can geek out on many distillery topics, but we didn't put boilers in. We put steam generators. So we brought in a German company called Certus, and the cool thing about it is we have no boiler licensing requirement. We generate 230 degree steam on demand. Pretty insane.
Wow. What's the electric bill like that? Or are you doing?
Yeah, they're natural gas.
Natural gas.
Yeah.
Might have to go up.
Yeah,
and
probably one of the best things I did in my new distillery. I mean, I have any other distillery, when you move to the next level, you try to correct all the mistakes you made the first time around. So, we have real drain floors with slope drains. We have, infinite point drains. You can pour water anywhere in my facility. It will go to the drain.
Yes.
And we have a boiler or a steam generator that will never, ever run out of steam. If we do, something really weird is going on.
Something bad has happened.
Very cool.
Floor drains are important. That's the bane of any brewer, winemaker, or distiller's existence.
You guys got to toughen up, man. I have no drains on my floors.
I live there.
You learn not to spill.
Yeah.
I have 3 drains, and none of them work unless I push stuff towards them.
Yeah. That's what we did, is we squeegeed for the first 14 years of our existence. I vowed never to squeegee again.
But we're down to only wasting about 30 gallons of water a day. All our water either gets consumed in the process or goes out with our spent grains, and we're left mopping floors. So
yeah,
I do think there's an advantage to learning not to have drains, because it keeps your staff from wasting water.
Yeah.
In California, it's a huge resource right now.
For sure.
We're in our third year of drought. That's tough,
Right.
Yeah, we put a couple other pieces of technology in, since we're geeking out about distilling stuff. We added a grain separator, so we put a centrifuge in to deal with grain, which was awesome. We used to dump all that down the drain, which was insane, but nonetheless was legal when we started, at least. And then I put a wastewater management system in my building. I got tired of the city telling me what was happening, and I wanted to tell them. Much better position to be in.
Very cool.
With the triticale, do you use it primarily as the, or do you use it mostly as the primary grain in a whiskey, or do you have
No, we use it in bourbon as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So we used to do a wheated bourbon, and we moved it to a triticale bourbon maybe 5 years ago or so. And it's just because it added more character to the bourbon.
Interesting. It's very cool.
I can see that. Yeah, I think the contrast between that triticale and corn in particular would be interesting, or even a modification with it, like using some oats or something like that on a small scale, to sort of go along with, you get that kind of again, that grains of paradise thing. And if you had some oats or something there in a mash bill to kind of modify that and sweeten it out on that backside, I could see a lot of cool things happening with the triticale thing for sure.
It's a cool grain.
Chasing that Irish whiskey. Wow.
Yeah.
We make a couple Irish style whiskeys here, and we use oats and malted, unmalted barley, a whole bunch of different stuff.
Very cool.
Are there any unique issues in the fermentation or distillation process with it?
Not really. I mean, we hammer mill down to a flour consistency, and then our new mashing system, we do a 2-stage mash now. So we basically have a shear mill between the two tanks. So we're also shear milling after the hammer mill, shear milling wet. So just reducing particle size, and we've never really had a problem with sticking or anything else using that grain. We've been very fortunate.
Okay.
What about I'm curious about fermentation yield, for example. It being a hybrid, wheat obviously yields a little more than rye does.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious where this falls at.
I'd say it's about 10% less than wheat.
Okay, so it's
on average, so not a lot. Again, that was maybe a function of the seed variety, and also where the grain is grown. So that farmer is pretty dang good at what he does. So we're involved with the farmer in seeding. I like to say I'm out with him every day. I'm not. I'm out a couple of days a year when he's seeding, and then we're at harvest. And sometimes we make decisions at harvest. Sometimes we can't. I mean, it's just kind of depends on what the season was like. So last year in 2021, we pulled no grain from the farm at all. We had enough in silo to last us this year. Knock on wood. That we'll make it through, but last year's crop was just not great. It didn't meet any of our criteria across the board. So we were fortunate that we store grain on our farmer's property. We silo, and he brings a bulk truck to us now. We literally super sacker bag 2,000-pound bags on our back dock. So we've come up with a pretty cool program to do that.
Wow.
Farmer technology for sure.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, it's great to see another kind of farm to bottle distillery doing that sort of stuff, especially with something as off kilter as triticale. I think if I said triticale to a farmer in Indiana, they'd just look at me like I was crazy and shit.
Yeah.
They won't know what are you talking about.
Yeah, they probably read about it. They just don't know what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most people think that there's some kind of Star Trek reference.
I can see that. Yeah. There's your next celebrity bottle right there, right? Kevin.
Yeah.
Yeah, get you some Captain Kirk whiskey going on there.
That's already been done, and
there's always room.
It's pretty
Is there barley
it's quite
in the
terrible.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is there barley in the mash bill?
Not in the triticale. The triticale you're tasting is 100% triticale.
So you're using enzymes.
We're using enzymes, correct? Yep. The only thing we don't enzyme is single malt. Other than that, we enzyme everything here.
Have you guys tried to malt any triticale ever for any projects?
There's been some local brewers that have taken some of our grain. We have a small micro malting facility here with mixed results, quite honestly.
Yeah, I could see it kind of going that Grains of Paradise going a little bit more of the peppery route if you malted it, perhaps. Is kind of what I was thinking, which might be kind of cool, though.
Yeah, and for some reason, it just doesn't translate in beer as well as it does in whiskey. And I think there's probably a triticale variety or seed variety that would work better in brewing that doesn't work great in distilling, or vice versa.
So those varieties that you talked about, too, I'm also kind of curious there. I can't imagine there's a lot of I may be wrong on this. You said there were 90 something that you knew of. I can't imagine there's a lot of development in that line, is there? Like a lot of there's not.
Yeah, it's not done here. It's done in Scotland. So that grain was
Right.
developed in Scotland in the 1880s, I think, or 1870s. For the most part, the reason why a farmer would grow that here is that it becomes a higher protein version of wheat. So from a feed standpoint, and if you're feeding it to livestock, you're ultimately getting a better result with livestock from a protein standpoint.
Makes sense.
So that being said, those varieties didn't really make great whiskey. So we were fortunate to have somebody who had some knowledge and who had studied that to kind of lead us to some seed varieties that ultimately worked out okay.
Very cool.
Very good.
I feel
Like I
like
said, I'm going to be tracking
I'm
down a
talking way
bottle.
too much here.
Yeah.
I think there's also one of the other things I'm interested in too. I'm gonna play around with the sample some too. I'm interested in that as a blending component for blended whiskeys. I think there's some really cool stuff that can be done there, right? Is I've got a little bit of 100% oat whiskey at work, and I think I'm going to play around with that and some of Chris's rice whiskey as well, and see what I can't come up with just out of curiosity. So
That's probably one thing that as a distillery that we are incredibly poor at is blending. We tend to just drive down the middle of the street, to be honest with you, and from where we started, that's kind of who we are. And we do a little bit of contract work with a couple of wineries that we get into a little bit more blending activity with, because wine guys love to blend. It's their favorite word. But we pretty much just run down the middle of the road, and it's how we've always done it. We don't typically blend, and we've never had the luxury of doing a 50-barrel bottling. It's 3 barrels here, 4 barrels there. So it's pretty easy for us to play that game and toe the line.
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. That's for sure, at all. Well, I'm definitely impressed by it. Like I said, I'm going to be hunting this down too. So I'm curious, what kind of distribution footprint do you guys have?
We sell product in about 42 states today.
Nice. Impressive.
Not everything everywhere. Our biggest thing over the last 3 or 4 years is we're a fairly early adapter into the RTD can business, and that's 50% of our annual sales now. We do 1.5 million cans a year, something like that.
Wow.
Fairly big number.
That is a big number.
Yeah.
My goodness.
A whole lot of cans, man.
That would pay for some fun projects for sure.
It makes the whiskey part a lot easier.
I guarantee it. Guarantee it.
Just allows us more time, quite honestly, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Kris, Alan, any other questions for Don right now? We can obviously jump back in as we're going, but
I'm sure I will have more. My wheels are turning on this for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm anxious to hear how the Triticale oat blend goes. I think that would be very interesting to see.
I will update all of you whenever I do that for sure, because I don't know why I'm going to do it other than I just want to do it. It's literally, guys, tomorrow morning when I go to work, that's the first thing I'm doing. I'm going to unlock the door and I'm going to the barrel room. So just is what it is.
Well,
you got to have goals in life, right?
You have my address, man. You know where to send a sample.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to switch over and talk with Kris Koenig from Golden Beaver Distillery. Now, Kris, you sent us two different whiskeys and the infamous Beaver Liquor Moonshine. So what do you want us to start with here?
Well, I mean, we can focus on the whiskey. We can just focus on the Pacific Flyway.
Okay.
We can talk about the White Dog, which is the Beaver Liquor. But I think what we're really, focused on here is a finished whiskey, and that would be the Flyway whiskey. The bourbon is a good example of rice as an alternative grain in bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that. That was actually done by MGP, not us. And we grabbed those 5 years ago when we thought we wanted to be a distillery. As an example of rice in bourbon production. And we're here in Northern California, and most people don't realize that we are surrounded by rice fields from north of Sacramento all the way up past Chico. we are rice. And we grow a very special grain of rice here, which is called a Calrose medium grain. And most of that Calrose gets shipped off to Asia and other parts of the world. And it's one of the biggest export crops in California. And, I'm sure, Alan, everybody can tell you this, is when you're starting up a distillery, you're looking around for local grains, just like Don did. And, it's at Moonshine University getting pounded over the head. You got to use local. And it was, the only thing we got local is rice. We have other grain growing farther south and towards Fresno. We can get the corn, we can get the wheat. But it was going to be rice. And so I came home, and for a year, to my wife's horror, I covered our house with little 8-gallon white paint can buckets that were fermenting different types of rice, rice and corn, rice and wheat, rice and rice on its own, rice with rice malt. We have a rice maltster here in Chico, and we ended up using every malt style that he has, and we try to do different mashes with that, and sat there and distilled on a small pot still, trying to come up with what we thought was going to work. And we finally narrowed down to our current recipe, and that was the birth of Beaver Liquor Moonshine. And from there, we've gone ahead and we've barreled in both used bourbon barrels and new ISC barrels at Char 3, very similar to Don, because we think it's just the right amount of char without getting too crazy. And rice is it's a very pliable distillate. It's very agreeable to do anything you want. If you want to harsh it up, you can. If you want to soften it out, you can. And so it's very moldable, both in the barrel as well as in blending. And so we think it's actually a magical grain. I'm amazed every day that there's not more rice whiskey in the world, to be honest with you. I think it was overlooked. And I not to say anything, speak badly of anybody. I think there is maybe some xenophobia about using rice. That why would you use rice when we have good North American wheat here? We have North American barley, and you don't need rice. And I think we've seen Jim Beam has done some brown rice bourbon. MGP did this study with University of Michigan, which resulted in the 5 barrels that we've used in the Pacific Flyway, and it's exceptional bourbon. It's different. It's very layered. It's super enjoyable. You put it on if you like it neat, it's great. But if you like it on the rocks, I think it's even better, because you pour a cast strength on a big sphere of ice and sit there and sip it for 45 minutes, and you just kind of drive down through all the layers. So I think rice has got a great future in distilling if people will open up to it. And I think, we're hoping to make our name off of it, to be honest with you.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right on that, Kris. And Kris, you already know this. You're one of my favorite distillers out there. We've had you on Distillers Talk a couple times. And what you said about Moonshine University pushing local and you doing the rice thing, just like Don with the Triticale, you use what's in your local food shed, right? And if that's what your local food shed is, that's what your local culture is, it makes sense. And you've done something interesting with rice that, as I've told you before, I played with rice many times and I never could get it right. I never could get it right, man. And you got something cool going here. And definitely every bottle I've ever gotten from you has been well loved, without a doubt. So
it was either get the mash right or get a divorce.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I can associate with that 100%. I think the day I told my wife, honey, I'm quitting my job and I'm opening a distillery, was one of the worst days of my life. And I always tell people I was the most stupid person in the entire world that day. Today, maybe I'm slightly smarter.
So I don't own my own, but I can speak to something similar to that. Mine was more along the lines of, if you don't get a job doing this legally, I'm out. So there wasn't a whole lot of options there. So it was liquid resume time. Yeah, Somebody please hire me.
Baby dad can't be in jail. That's
Yeah.
the lesson there.
Right.
Kris, I think the flavor is amazing. I love your pursuit of the alternate grain.
Thank you.
I get, and I appreciate it to a very high level. I get a very nosy kind of element, which I think is super cool. It's not a burny thing. It's like that nose carries through your nasal passage and is just tickling. Which I think is super cool. And I get this, it's a bizarre word, but I get this kind of almost sake tone, which I think is awesome. And like you said, the rice is adaptable, and I'm going to use the terminology. It's the tofu of grains, man. It is flexible.
Yep. Yeah, it's very pliable, and we stay away from the koji not to over accentuate that sake taste.
Yeah, but there's definitely some element there, and I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
By the way, Moonshine University, Spokane, Washington, USA. Just want to share that with you.
Nice.
That's great. Great.
So one of the things I love about this particular rice whiskey too is and you kind of touched on it there, but that it's almost that kind of umami sort of character, right? There's sort of a bright thing on the nose, but it's not the ethanol, and then on the palate, it's earthy, but it's not earthy in the same way we talked about with the wheat can go in that kind of earthy direction, that kind of bran direction. But then there's also there's a perceived sweetness there, but again, not like wheat. It's not that kind of cream cheese icing thing. It's a more round, and the more you think on rice and you think about the different ways you can make rice, as Kris was talking about, the different directions you can take it in, you can pick up on a little bit of all of that. You can pick up on sort of that sweet sort of characteristic. You can pick up on a little bit more of that savory sort of thing. And I'll tell you something, Kris is probably going to punch me for saying this, but one of the ways that I love to drink this, I absolutely love to drink this, is just in a highball with L8, which is a ginger ale that we have here in the Midwest, Kentucky, and Indiana in particular. I freaking love it in that stuff, man. I could sit and drink a fifth of this easily. And I don't drink sodas anymore, but I will make an exception for a highball with this and L8. That's become kind of a go-to. Like when I don't want to sit down and have a bourbon, because as you, Kris, and you, Kevin, both know, I get a little burnout on that whole thing, right? So I need a break from it sometimes. And that's kind of the thing that's been my go-to here lately, as far as I need a break from that. That's where I'm going. And I really enjoy that.
Try a little, instead of using the L8, although I do love the ginger, just use a straight ahead soda with a lime and ginger. And
so that's probably good.
Yeah, it's super tasty. So muddle the ginger up a little bit and mix it in there. Makes a great highball. So,
here's another thing I forgot to tell you about too. For anybody who's, I think most of the country's out of season for them now, but anybody that likes morel mushrooms. The last time we had morel mushrooms, that's what I was drinking with the morels, and it worked extremely well. So,
hey Kris, do you chill filter?
No, we don't filter at all. No,
we typically chill filter anything under about 94 proof, and then don't chill filter above that.
Yeah, this was meant to go out at 90, but we had a bunch of samples out, and we started at 80 and went up through 95, and 86 was just perfect. And but we didn't chill filter. I mean, we don't get a lot of fusel oil development through there, so I'm really not sure what we'd gain, and I think we might lose a little mouthfeel if I did that. But something I'd take a look at.
Yeah, I was always afraid of that, and it honestly hasn't happened for us. And we had problems just shipping product all over, especially in the winter. We were getting precipitate in the bottom. And especially when you use a clear bottle, it makes it a precarious thing. If you use a green or a brown bottle, you probably spare a little bit of that for sure. 119 proof, I always have a proof discussion with people here in the Northwest because we're kind of opposite the rest of the world. When we typically barreled 120 proof. We'll have a 6 or 8 year old barrel to come out at 143. So our climate is so dry that we evaporate water instead of alcohol. So our barrel proof definitely goes up across the board.
Yeah, we have the same problem here.
Yeah.
Our rick house is a Connex box, and it'll go from 60 degrees in the morning to 140 degrees by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we're opening the doors, trying to vent off the heat. And then the coastal Delta breezes will pop in here, and it'll drive back down 6 degrees, and we cycle those barrels like that pretty much every day. And we get some periods in July that it holds all day long. We can't get rid of the heat. But it does help accelerate. This is a 1-year-old whiskey here.
Yeah, it's pretty damn good for a 1-year-old whiskey, dude.
Yes.
Yeah. The legs on this thing are incredible. I mean, it just clings to the glass. So it's a lot of oil content.
I like the higher proof version, but maybe that's the distiller in me who's tasting stuff at barrel proof.
I will send you. We're going to be dumping some barrels here in about 2 weeks. I'll send you some.
Yeah, it's
exceptional. Yeah.
One of the other things I wanted to point out with Kris too, and like I mentioned, I've had him on my show, Distillers Talk, in the past. Even though it's not a grain, Kris does some excellent honey-based distillates as well. And his white spirits are two of the most impressive white spirits that we've ever honestly had on that particular show. In my opinion, they're excellent. I think even Kris won over sort of the Southern Moonshine crowd last year, I think, by visiting some of those guys. And they can be a hard group to play to sometimes, especially, Kris being out in California. So, yeah. But I think he won them over for sure. So
a couple of distillers just walked away, didn't say a word. So I take that as an affirmative.
I take that as a win. Yeah. Some of them you might want to walk away occasionally, that's part of it. So,
yeah. But no, we've been super lucky, and I can't thank Alan for all his help, because I do call him on the side with questions, and that is one very cool thing about this industry. Everybody's approachable. I mean, and and we, before we even had anything, distillers would talk to me about using rice, and that was very cool. Gave me sideways glances, but they worked with us. But the interesting thing about the rice, if you take the rice up to 192, you get a very sharp, not sharp, but you get a very prominent sweet note in your vodka, which is very interesting. It makes a very popular vodka here because it does lend itself to a lot of cocktails, and it isn't harsh. So,
you guys just recently added some new equipment to do some vodka there too, right?
Yeah, we're now up to 3 pot stills. One is 150 with a column attached to it. So we took the jump. I can hear the folks at Moonshine Use screaming at me, "Don't ever distill vodka. It's stupid. Just go ahead and buy it."
Buying the GNS. Back the truck up.
I tell you, our gin is awesome, and our gin is made from that rice base, and we don't take it up to 190. We do it right off the moonshine, which I think is makes that just an absolute great gin. And so we've been lucky, and honestly I can say we've been extremely lucky to find this grain and find that nobody else in the market's doing it. So
that's a beautiful distillate.
Yeah, there's some folks down in Louisiana, I think somebody in South Carolina, but it's not. We're not making bourbon bourbon me too, right?
Yeah.
Which
right.
seems to be a problem right now in the industry.
Right.
Yeah. I think that all the people that were telling you not to make vodka were telling you that because they can't.
Well, I got a very interesting story about. We were having some trouble with this still, and I will say there was mostly my problem on managing the phlegmators and the cooling water, and we had too much pressure coming into the system, what it turned out to be, and our actually the agitator in the pot, which we don't have any grain in there, we just kind of keep it stirred and keep the even heat, was actually building up pressure into the column itself, which was another problem we didn't know we had. But through this whole thing, I reached out to a lot of people, and one person, will not mention names, just funny, said, "Well, you're learning the secret about vodka. Nobody distills on 192." And I just said, "I'm sorry, I can't do that." I said, we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna distill at 192 because it's a craft. And if you can't do your craft, you shouldn't call yourself a distiller. If you're gonna put out a vodka, it's gotta be over 190. And if you're really good, it should be 192. So
we do. It's gotten a lot easier for us now. Our big still runs off a touch screen, so I just push the button and make vodka. The ultimate distilling for dummies program. There was a lot of work that went into developing the methodology to make that happen, but we're fortunate. I mean, we have 42 plates of distillation now, so it's it's a rock and roll thing.
Yeah, for sure. This one goes to 11, right? 12.5, really.
We're 16 after double distilled in the pot. So you know, but we can guarantee you're not drinking heads. That's for sure.
You know, there wouldn't be any show that was complete with Kris Koenig on it if I didn't also call out Rick Gibson of Tennessee Thumpers and tell him to get that damn thumper still done and get it to Kris.
Still done. I just want the boiler, the other 100-gallon boiler he owes me.
Right. Come on, Rick. Put that thing in the crate. Send it out there.
It's going to screw up my new tasting room, Rick.
Get on it, Rick. It's time.
It's a crazy time to be doing this stuff, right? You guys, it's the supply chain thing is a real issue. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about, I mean, I built a whole new distillery and had distilling equipment sitting here on the ground and then couldn't find a replacement air valve because there were none. So, you know, the delay upon delay, and it's insane. And I don't know if you've seen this, Kris, but trying to secure glass right now is horrible.
No, I got more dollars tied up in glass than I do in my rick house.
Yeah, it's
because you got to buy it because it's there, and it's just like, you know. And then you're waiting for the guy at Costco to cut the PO. It's like, dude, you got to cut the PO. I got to release the cash out of this thing. You know,
it's crazy.
Have you guys had the glass issue where you call your normal glass supplier and they're like, we sold that to a broker. Here's a broker's number. Go track this guy down. And then you start tracking down 3 or 4 different brokers trying to figure out where that went.
Yeah, we're fortunate we have a proprietary mold. Fortunate and cursed. I'm going to use the same word. So we had a U.S. company making glass for us, Primal Glass, and they were a great company. But unfortunately, their plant was built in the 1940s. One of their 3 lines go down. Who do they get rid of? All the small guys. Right? So they moved our production to India.
Yeah, you're looking, this is Primal right here. I had to buy everything they had when they left the country to keep us going. We had to put a big PO that we weren't ready to do. And then this guy is Primal.
Yeah, it's insane.
So
buying aluminum cans is a lot easier right now.
You guys out west, you guys having any trouble with barrels yet? Because that's become a big thing here recently.
Yeah, we do an annual allocation, and we're bumping up against our allocation, meaning that they will not allow us to press it. But at least I have right now I have more capacity than I have barrels, quite frankly. But hopefully that'll catch up next year. Right.
Yeah, it's becoming a real issue. We're still able to get barrels right now, but I don't know. I mean, I'll put it this way: it's getting hard to get a hold of the suppliers, even when you do business with them on a all the time basis. Gets a little concerning when you don't hear back from them and you've already put in an order and you expect it to be there. Now they've always done me right; it always shows up on time. But man, that first time it doesn't show up the day it's supposed to be there, you're going to be freaking out, you know. So, and I know that everybody else that I know that's gotten in recently into the business in the past year or two, they're struggling with barrels right now because they can't find anything.
Well,
I'm sorry.
The source market's gone away too. I mean, they're doubling the price of the barrels, and you know, you're like, what the hell? I mean, I don't know if it's just everybody's gotten on the bandwagon that we're going to create a shortage and you're going to choke, but they're going to choke their market away, which is what I don't get it. I mean, we'll eventually all find alternative sources for everything.
Yeah.
And I don't think these guys realize downstream that's going to affect their business. So they're going to create new competitors that they didn't have before they started this game.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We saw that maybe 10 years ago, right? When barrel prices went from $150 to $250 a barrel, or $300 a barrel, right? And it was based upon a wood shortage, right? And then that kind of took care of itself for a while. So sometimes I think it's vendors, rightfully so, who are, escalating their pricing profiles to, take a notch up in the marketplace. And, no one ever moves their price up and takes it back down.
And I think every craft distiller is okay with like a little bump in price, like cover labor or something, right? But then like you talk $90 a barrel, Jack, it starts getting to be a problem real quick. And that's, we have a good price. I'll say that, and we have good barrels, but $90 a barrel is a pretty good little jump all of a sudden to go to. So,
well, you got to be on your game for barrels, right? I mean, you have to know the criteria, and I mean, there's a lot of young wood being sold out there right now.
Yep, that's part of our problem is we do all 24 month and older. We I won't do anything less than 24 month. And I'll be honest with you guys, we had this conversation at work. If it comes down to not being able to get 24 month old wood, I'll honestly kick everything from the bourbon category over to whiskey and recoup barrels. I'm not going to keep chasing that one way or the other, because I think there's still a market for it. So,
well, welcome to Rice Whiskey.
Yeah, right.
Used and new barrels, and you get the best of both.
Well, you know me. If it was up to me, I probably wouldn't make a drop of bourbon anyways. But being on the wrong side of the river in southern Indiana, you kind of have to do something to get people in the life raft to cross the river and throw you a bone or two. So
it's a very wide river.
It is right.
Don,
you gotta avoid the falls of Ohio. I mean, nowadays the toll's so high and gas is so high, you can't afford to really drive over here. So,
hey,
Don, have you tried using used barrels on a triticale?
We have, and I use the analogy, at least with my crew. Used barrels are great. It's just time, right? It takes 2x time to try to deviate or try to get the same result. So right now we're close to allocating almost every whiskey we have. I mean, we can't. We made poor decisions years ago, quite honestly, or we didn't have the money to do it.
Have you tried any of the so we do a lot of barrel rejuvenation, having them shaved down and recharred and all that stuff too, especially for apple brandy. And I've had extremely good luck out of that. I've not tried it with whiskey yet. Well, I think I have, but it's not one that's been released yet. But with apple brandy, it seems to work pretty well.
Well, I mean, you're lucky too. Geographically, you're close to the cooperage houses. I'm in Washington State. I'm a long ways away, and with freight costs today, cost me $5,000 to buy a truck to send empty barrels there to get them refinished, and then $5,000 back. Maybe in the world of barrels that might become a reality though in the future. That is an economical scenario.
Well, you're one of those Scottish guys that's ready to retire and then just have a little part-time job out there somewhere.
I like that plan.
We actually have a recoup house right here in Oroville, California.
Oh, from on the wine side?
Well, they do wine and whiskey barrels, but they're right here in Oroville. I mean, it's that's not too bad a drive. That's
a whole lot closer than the middle of the country.
You might look them up. Yeah, I'll send you the information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, any other questions for the moment for Kris?
Really nice stuff, Kris. I'm impressed.
I'm honored that you believe that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. My absolute favorite party trick still since I met you, Kris, is especially with guys that do a little home distilling and stuff like that, is to break out the Beaver liquor. And when you can make something half as good as what he's doing, you're on the right track. But until then, take this home and do some homework. So,
well, I'll teach them how to do it. I'll teach them how to do it if they go get the boiler from Rick Gibson and deliver it.
Or if they pay you, 3/4 of what Moonshine University makes every year, right? I mean, you gotta make cash somewhere. Barrel costs went up, guys.
It's always precarious when I see somebody come across the parking lot with a clear mason jar. Right? Now I'm being set up.
Yeah, it's more, for me. It's more precarious in the idea that there's no gray area. Like there's none of it that's ever like, it's either terrible or really good, right? And it's almost as much misfortune if it's really good, because then I know the next question is, so you guys got any jobs?
Yeah,
right. Could you guys make this for me?
Here's my resume. Drink it.
Right.
Yes.
I can't complain about that. That's how I got in. So
Now, I will say, Kris, since I was introduced to your whiskey, I've used it in several blind samples, and everybody is always very impressed with it, but has no clue as to what they're drinking. And everybody comes away very, very impressed with what you're able to do with that. When you tell them it's rice, they're stunned. So you're doing some really fantastic things in Chico. So excited to see what all you've got coming up next. Speaking of coming up next, we will hand it over to Mr. Alan Bishop. Let him tell us about the Morning Glory that we will be drinking.
First and foremost, I'm the worst promotion person on the face of the planet because I don't have a sample of my own whiskey in front of me. Second of all, I don't remember what that mash bill is because it's super freaking weird. It is by far the weirdest bourbon mash bill of anything that we make. So this sort of happened as a lark very early on at Spirits of French Lick. So we play with a lot of alternative grains. We focus on all double pot still distillation for all the bourbons, all the rye. Probably 90+% of the brandies are all double pot distilled. I'm in love with double pot still distillation. I love the fact that you're not creating consistency. You're managing it over time through doing blends, etc., or having very unique single barrels. I love the idea of being able to play around with different alternating factors with that sort of style of distillation, that very old, primitive, sort of practical distiller style that a lot of people in the industry seem to have moved away from in recent years, including large distillers. So we play with a lot of alternative yeast strains. We play with a lot of alternative grains. We play with alternative distillation methodologies, alternative barrel chars, etc. Now, almost all the bourbons you're ever going to taste, they're going to be in a number 2 charred oak barrel with a 105 entry proof, typically 1,200 gallon fermentations, split into 600 gallons that we start with one yeast that we propagate ourselves. The first day, that yeast is very grain forward, our motto being respect the grain, this sort of idea that grain has terroir in the same way that grapes do. And so we want to blend, sort of have a 50-50 blend and balance of raw material fermentation and distillation with 50% maturation, so that you always have those positive attributes of the grain coming to the forefront. And then 600 gallons on day 2 with a brandy yeast, one of 3 different brandy yeast strains that we use. So all the mainline bourbons all kind of have that same sort of ethos to them. It's really just variations on what that ethos, that philosophy of distillation with those bourbons and rye whiskey are, as far as, switching out grains to different alternative grains, different alternative malts, and again, different yeast strains. No chill filtration on any of this stuff. I'm a big believer, having come from the brandy industry and done a little bit of chill filtration there. Sometimes it improved stuff for us and sometimes it didn't. My philosophy is I want what you taste to be as close to off the still, if it's a white spirit, as what it was whenever I created it, or as close to out of the barrel as what it was when I created it, one way or the other. So the only filtration we do is literally a bag filtration to pull out any sort of particles that you might have otherwise. Buckwheat bourbon, or the Morning Glory, is basically started off as kind of a joke originally, really. I don't know how many distillers would admit to that, but so if you buy number 2 yellow dent corn, which is what a lot of distillers do use, is yellow number 2. In the Midwest, buckwheat is such an endemic weed that you can have upwards of 2% buckwheat just floating around in your yellow number 2 dent corn if you don't clean it post-harvest or clean it before you get it into the distillery. So, there's a number of bourbons that I'm sure everyone is familiar with that they've drank on the market that have at least 2% buckwheat in them. Unfortunately, in my opinion, buckwheat, which is a pseudo grain, meaning it's not really classified as a grain, but they now consider it for bourbon as of a few years ago. Of its own accord, raw, to me, it doesn't have a great flavor. It's very grassy. It's very pastoral. But if you toast buckwheat and you turn it into kasha, it gets some interesting sort of flavor characteristics to it. Now, this one's a little hard for me to talk about sometimes because it honestly does not fit my flavor profile. And again, I'm a little odd as a distilling marketer here, and that I'm willing to say that that's the case. To be honest with you guys, when we first did this thing and it first came off the still, I thought it was horrible. I thought it was the worst thing that I ever tasted. That's a true story, and I wasn't really a fan of it until about year 3.5, and it started changing the barrel, and it did some interesting things. Now, again, I'm the first to admit I'm not a huge fan of it. I didn't think it would do anything, but we have sold the hell out of this stuff. It went crazy. Like I literally told the guys on the team, I'm like, there's not a single traditional bourbon drinker that's ever in any way, shape, or form going to go for this because it's so off the wall. And they proved me wrong, which made me probably look foolish to my team, but I'm glad they did, because otherwise we'd be sitting on quite a bit of buckwheat bourbon right now, Morning Glory, which we're not, because we're sold out of it. I'll comment on the name real quick. The name Morning Glory, we play off of a lot of historical stuff. So the name Morning Glory is actually the name of a sort of a tavern that existed more as an ideal than an actual place. And this tavern was really kind of located around a place called Campbellsburg, Indiana, just south of what was called Cave River Valley, where there were at one point in time 9 commercial distilleries. So the Morning Glory started off as sort of a roadhouse or a tavern at the time, an inn, a place where you get some soup, maybe lay down and take a nap. Maybe you'd be able to get a woman of the night to sort of, shack up with you for a moment. The sort of very primitive greasy spoon with adult entertainment, as it were. Later on, it turned into a bootleg establishment, and by bootleg establishment, what it really was a federal bonded government warehouse for those 9 distilleries that also sold booze illicitly from those 9 distilleries directly from the barrel. And it finally ended up as a roadhouse and an old mill that was there at Cave River Valley. So this one is a very unique flavor profile. There's almost a sort of stout sort of characteristic to it. A lot of people think there's some chocolate malt in there. There's no chocolate malt in there whatsoever. It's literally that kasha coming to the forefront. I will tell you the reason that I personally don't like it, which is funny because it's the reason a lot of other people do seem to like it. For me, I have a very distinct memory of this flavor, of being a child, when being very sick, being like 5 years old, in the back of my mom's car, and she made the mistake of giving me Reese's Pieces. And to me, that particular whiskey has got that Reese's Pieces sort of chocolate, sort of peanut butter, stout, very heavy, very hefty, very oily thing going on. And so sometimes for me, it's a little hard to deal with, but I do certainly understand why other people might enjoy it or find it interesting.
You don't taste any black cherry in that? It's like a dark fruit.
And it does depend on the barrel, and I do believe the one that you guys have. So we were out of the mainline release of the Morning Glory by the time we got ready to send samples out. This was a single barrel that was in the tasting room. All 53-gallon barrels, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. Number 2 char. So this was a single barrel that was in the tasting room to sort of hold us over till we got more Morning Glory, and it's already gone now. So I don't know that I've even gotten to taste this particular single barrel other than when we first did it. I haven't tasted it since we bottled it for sure.
I get kind of a cinnamony tone, quite honestly, and a spicy, not like spicy hot, like almost like it has a little peppery tone to it as well.
Okay.
Definitely pull out, and I 100% get the malty side.
Mm-hmm.
I would have guessed chocolate malt for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned the cinnamon thing too, because that's one of the things that we get from our house yeast. One of the profiles we get is sort of that kind of Ceylon cinnamon, kind of cinnamon toast crunch sort of characteristic out of it.
I totally taste that.
Yeah, there's to me, I get a cinnamon buttered pecan, and that sweetness and that nuttiness kind of hangs in one part of your mouth, while there's a little bit of tobacco that starts to come out in the finish in another part of your mouth. So it's very complex and enjoyable, I think.
There's a lot of layers to it, and I, again, like I said, I try to be as honest about these things as what I can, with it not being my flavor profile. I will say I have learned to appreciate it for what it is by listening to other people's tasting notes. So yeah, I really enjoy listening to what you guys are saying, because now the next time that, and this sounds again terrible, but the next time I'm forced to taste this on a single barrel pick or doing a blend, there are things that I'll be looking for and going, okay, well, maybe there's something here that I can enjoy anyways.
Yeah, I like the green bill, super eclectic, which I think is awesome. And really, small distillers, that's what we're here for. We're here to push the envelope, and
Mhm.
the big guys have perfected the standard methodology. They've McDonald's that. They're super good at it.
Mhm.
And we can't compete doing that. I mean, we'd be beating our head against the wall. They're going to do it at, $20 less a bottle and kill you every day. But if you can tell the story and embrace your farmer and your local grain scenario, and be eclectic about it, and listen, it still has to be good. Being eclectic is not good on its own.
Nope.
Right? It still has to be consumer friendly, and you have to be able to connect people with those flavor profiles and make them
people have to
understand.
be able to wrap their mind around it. Yeah.
So we can't just make what we want, right? We have to make stuff people will buy.
Mhm.
Right. No, it's so this was an interesting one too, and I didn't mention it. This is the one thing that differentiates. It's a little different from what the two of you did. So the buckwheat is not local to us. That's a Georgia thing. That's where it comes from. Here's what I will say though that does make it kind of interesting. We originally couldn't get kasha from that company, so we hand toasted all of that kasha. This is the dumbest thing. We literally, what we had was a double boiler fudge maker, right? We literally would dump 15 pounds at a time into the stupid double boiler the first year that we did this. And it was a 2-day process for 15 pounds at a time. And finally we talked the company into selling us kasha because we knew they made it, but they were selling it for, health food stores and all that stuff. And I'll never forget, little things make distillers happy, right? I'll never forget one of the things that made me happiest early on was seeing pallets of bagged kasha, marked kasha, come into the distillery because, finally, I don't have to toast 15 pounds at a time for 2 days, to get it where I need it at. So, but yeah, those initial batches, which that would be a barrel of those initial batches, they were all hand toasted on that stupid little fudge making machine that we had. So
that's great.
Yeah, sometimes those mistakes are your defining moments, right? And one of ours at Dry Fly was I hired a kid. It was my son's college roommate. Played professional baseball for a number of years and got done with his career and wanted a job making liquor. So we brought him in, being the nepotistic company we are. And he put gin in a barrel. Like he screwed up and put the wrong thing in a barrel. And we sat for years and said, like, what in the hell are we going to do with this? And one day we got a cola and said, we're just going to make barrel aged gin. And come to find out, half a gin used to be barreled in the day, and I think we were one of the first small distilleries to do barrel aged gin. And it was 100% mistake. It had nothing to do with any plan.
Yeah, and I do that quite often where like I'll even forget about things that we have, and then we'll be in the warehouse doing a tasting or whatever. So we have a now 5-year-old gin, and the reason it's 5 years old is because we did one barrel and I forgot that we did it. So that's about to come out, and then I have an interesting mistake that you guys might enjoy. I have a half blackberry brandy, half rye whiskey. And that literally was the result of an old still hand not marking a barrel. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
I want to taste that.
Yes.
It's going to be interesting for sure.
We're going to have another show where we just taste everybody's mistakes.
Yeah, right? That would be a great theme.
We literally just released a rye whiskey recently as a single barrel that was called Fubar because of a still hands mistake, and it was playing around with 95 or might have been 95 or 100% rye. I don't remember, but we were also playing with multiple different rye malts, and he dropped 2 of the wrong malts in there. And to this day, he didn't write it down. He didn't tell anybody for a couple of days, and he threw the bags away. I don't know if he dropped the 2 wrong rye malts in, or he grabbed an actual barley malt and dropped it in. I don't know what he did for sure. So the problem is the whiskey turned out really great, and we have no idea what it actually is. So
that's funny.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want to conquer the kasha market in Chile, it's a traditional dessert to serve a puff kasha with pear juice. So if you did a pear brandy with a blend of your kasha whiskey, you might have something for South America.
Oh yeah. Well, let me tell you, a little fat kid. little fat kid tasting note here. You take you a good piece of homemade bread and you toast it and get some Nutella and put some kasha and that Nutella on top of it. That right there, Jack's good eating. That'll get you through a day too.
Yeah.
Emily Chambers, who's in the audience in the chat, she wants to know if we can do a vote-off show on the people in your distilleries that made these mistakes and to see if they're forgiven or not. So,
well, they ain't there no more, but he did get a free bottle of Foo Bar because his name was on it, and I had to make sure he was taken care. He's not there because I fired him. He's not there because he quit and he had some personal stuff to deal with, and he's still around. We make sure he got a bottle of that. And next time I release another barrel of it, he'll get a bottle of it then too. And I'm sure that he'll get the blackberry and rye whiskey as well, because if it's really bad, he might get the whole barrel. Who knows?
Right. So, yeah, my guy's still here. Like employee number 1, been here for 14 years.
Wow.
Right.
So, Alan, have you ever tried a whiskey that is closer to 100% kasha / buckwheat? Have you ever done that?
No, honestly, Kevin, because early on, obviously, a lot of the things that we've done at Spirits of French Liquor, things that I played around with as a kid growing up on the illicit side of things and being a farmer and being experimental. And buckwheat was one of those things that I never ran into it before. Like, I knew what it was. I'd had buckwheat pancakes, which, by the way, in my opinion, as a Midwesterner, terrible, right? Like, I'd rather eat hay chaff than eat a buckwheat pancake. So maybe I had a bias from the get-go. But the truth of the matter is, like, the buckwheat thing was not my idea. It was the previous owner's idea, John Doty. He mentioned it. Now, I came up with the mash bill and I came up with the proportions. And again, part of that was more of a joke than anything else. But after running it the first time and tasting off the still, I just honestly, I had no interest in, like, what else can I do with buckwheat? Right. It wasn't right there knocking on the door going, oh, this is interesting. Like, it's one of those things that's interesting in when it comes off the still, it's not very good sort of way, at least as far as I'm concerned. I honestly, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have told you that stuff was never seeing the light of day. I really would have said that it was never going to come out. We were never doing anything with it. But that sometimes you get over your own bias too. It's not what you like; it's what the consumer likes, and if that's what they're into, then great. We'll make more buckwheat. I wish we'd made 3 times as much. We'd still have some, maybe.
Right. So if you disliked it so much, why bother to use it in a mash bill?
Because I don't own anything.
Because it sounded cool.
Right.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry. I have some family issues, and as Kevin alluded to, that I need to deal with. So I hate to leave, but it's family first.
Yeah, Don, I'm gonna get your contact info from Kevin, and I'd like to get you on Distillers Talk sometime soon.
Yeah, and ditto. Happy to share with you guys what we're doing. We have some fun things going on.
I hope it's actually a hatch going on in the river, and you're just blowing smoke here.
Listen, I wish it was that way. Unfortunately, every river in the West is blown out big time right now, or I wouldn't even be here.
Yeah. We'll come down and put you on the we'll put you on the Upper Sacramento, man.
I loved it. I fished the Upper and Lower Sac. It used to be one of my favorite places. Fishing with the guys out of the Fly Shop, John Mercer and those guys. So I have been on the river many times. I think it's one of the funnest places to fish in the West Coast.
Quite honestly, last week had a great time.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for including me. I'm honored to meet you guys. And if I can do anything else, please let me know.
Great whiskey. Thanks, buddy.
Cheers, you guys.
Thank you, Don. So with what else? Again, Alan, I kind of want to go back to your bias against the kasha buckwheat for just a second. And that mash bill, I found that. And you may have seen that I put it up on the screen.
I'm glad that is the only one of my mash bills I don't have memorized.
Well, it's rather convoluted. But are you doing anything else with it, or is it just what you're doing with the Morning Glory?
So it is one of the mainline products. So one of the things that we will do, and there are existing barrels, we will do an iconoclast release of that. Now, what that iconoclast becomes, I don't know for sure. Probably just like every other dorky wood person in the world. Like right now, my thing is kind of Amburana. So I'm gonna that to me, that Reese's Pieces thing and Amburana would work really well. So there may be an iconoclast that's at least maybe 2 or 3 barrels, and maybe one of those barrels is Amburana finish. I think honestly that buckwheat could hold up to something really, really weird. Like if the winery wanted to take their sweet red Concord wine and put it into a new oak barrel, dump that, and then maybe finish some buckwheat in that, I think it would hold up to it. So there'll be some things like that. And maybe this might be the other thing that might be interesting. So there does exist a single sherry butt. Sherry butt. So 120 gallons US basically. That is a blend, and this is an Islay sherry butt. So it is a phenolic smoked Scotch whiskey barrel. So the blend is 1 barrel of Lee Sinclair, 1 barrel of Solomon Scott rye whiskey, which is a 65% rye, and 1 barrel of Morning Glory. The barrel currently has artwork that I drew on it. Rather, I'm not going to say I'm a talented artist, but it is called Wrong Side of the River. And ironically, the proportions are as such that you could either do it as a blended American finished whiskey or a blended bourbon finished whiskey, depending on how many people I wanted to make mad in one go. So, you can look out for that depending on what the bipolar mood says that day, I guess.
That'll be interesting then.
Yeah,
it's good. It's much better than I thought it would be. And lucky for us, those Islay barrels, they were dry when they came in, and it's not been in there but maybe 2.5, 3 months, and it's already just beautiful. We also did an apple brandy like that as a smoked apple brandy, and as soon as I get some bottles in mid-June, the apple brandy's going out the door.
Send me a bottle, buddy. I'll take a bottle.
Oh, absolutely, man. That apple brandy, that's going to be kind of my baby. I mean, the Whiskey Witch right now is kind of my baby, and then the replacement for the Whiskey Witch is that smoked apple brandy. That's the one I'm super excited about.
Well, my staffs are jonesing on your hazmat apple brandy here. So if you have any left, I know.
Good. That hazmat apple brandy, just talking about weird stuff, right? Like, who would have thought that there was ever a market for hazmat apple brandy? That was even ever, who considered that would even be a thing? Exactly. You know why it's a thing? Because nobody considered it a thing and nobody did it. That's the only reason.
Right.
You still have some?
Oh yeah. That's going to end up being one of those things that I'm going to try to, I guess I maybe try to make a name off of, is because there's not very much of that stuff out there. Like, we can release a couple hazmats of apple brandy a year. I'm not big on hazmat myself, but if people like it again, then I'm all for it. And if we can hold on to some of that stuff and allocate it as hazmat, then I think we should.
Bartenders ought to be going nuts over it.
Yeah, absolutely.
They do so much with it in the bar, and you don't have to use much. So that's the advantage.
That's one of the goals with that smoked apple brandy too, is to leave it at a higher proof. But one of the things I want to put on the label is sort of like some of the higher end Lafroig releases, right? That it's kind of like an extract. You add water to don't be afraid to add water, and add water to your preference, to bring out what you want. So,
right. And I've played around with that hazmat like that, and it's interesting to try it at the full hazmat proof, but also do a little compare and contrast, putting a little water in it too. So
that whole thing started, and Kris, you'll like this. You could do this with rice whiskey easy too, I think. That whole thing with the hazmat started with the apple brandy, with doing barrel tastings for single barrel picks. And if you had people in there in the morning and right before they went to lunch, and they're all feeling pretty good by the time they get through the number of barrels they're going through. All right, guys, cool. We're getting ready to go to lunch. Let's pull either a tequila barrel apple brandy or a regular apple brandy, just sort of as a treat, right? And then don't tell them what the proof is. You just give it to them. And nobody ever, not once did anybody ever choke on it. Not once did anybody say it was hot.
Right.
And you get you thinking like, all right, well, they don't if you clearly can, if you're tasting it and you're drinking it, you're not realizing that it's at 145 or whatever, then let's see what happens with it. Let's put it out there, and it's worked well. So
yeah, we may do that. I mean, we could obviously do it with beaver liquor. I mean, I honestly prefer beaver liquor at higher proof than the 90 that we bottle it out at. It's more intense. It's a much more focused taste. So meandering around. So there you go.
It is damn good stuff.
And one of the coolest bottles in the entire industry. I love it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Appreciate that. Well, actually, I got Fred Minnick graced you with some awards, and he did us last year. And, for him to say that he's got to think about drinking this as a daily alternative to whiskey, I think it's awesome. That just tells you that there's some potential out there.
There is. And I think that the three of us that we had on this show tonight, distiller wise, I think one of the takeaways from this too, that maybe you guys probably see it more than I do to some extent, because you're in a different location in the country, but drinking trends are changing. People's palates are changing. And even the old hardcore, Elijah Craig drinkers, the old hardcore, bourbon drinkers in general, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them are looking for something new and different. And now's the time to do new and different. And you know what the cool thing about new and different is it's not new and it ain't that different. It's really old, but it's way old. It's way back before any of these guys were born or gals were born, right? And we're bringing back some of these old traditions. We're adding a little new spin to it. We're presenting you with something that is both traditional and new at the same time, and quality that none of the big guys could possibly keep up with, because they can't turn on a dime like we can. They can't do the things we can.
Would you like to go to sleep having 20, 30 rick houses of 30,000 barrels of the same stuff?
No,
I prefer my sleeping arrangement right now, because we can adapt very quickly and change the story. I mean,
absolutely.
And total respect for the big guys. Trust me,
100%.
I enjoy all their spirits, but the point is that's a gamble. That's a huge gamble.
But they're starting to copy you. That's the thing is you're doing their R&D for them.
Yep.
And they're going to copy you, because you know better than to try to copy them, because you can't Jim Beam.
No,
he can't.
But the other beautiful part of that too, like I said, though, they can't turn on a dime. And Kris and Kevin, you both know this, and I know Kris, you do, because you keep up with the moonshine circles, home distilling circles too. The cool things that have happened in the past 5 to, let's say, 10 years with craft distilling pales in comparison to where it's going to be at 5 years from now, especially as some of these new distillers that started off as home distillers that have experience that you would not ever see or get in a large facility, and access to equipment that you wouldn't see or get in a large facility, because they're innovative, right?
Right.
Everything in the next 5 to 10 years, as this next crop comes in, the paradigm is going to change completely. The three of us are going to be on a show like this in 5 years, talking about shit that none of us ever considered in any way, shape, or form as being serious.
How about
for me as a distiller?
How about fava beans?
Right.
No, I'm dead. You laugh. I've been approached by a professor at Chico State to distill fava beans, and it's actually been done.
Yeah.
It's going to be a whole, that's like your kasha. Maybe it's going to be a fava bean kasha Chianti. I mean, I don't know.
You never know. You don't know what's going to work, right? You have no idea.
Joke there, going back to
if you finish that in a Chianti barrel, then
that's right.
Then you've hit something.
We'll do a fava bean whiskey finished in Chianti.
You will break pop culture right then and there.
Or even equipment wise, you've got the Tennessee Thumper. There's now there are literally companies out there making larger scale Soxhlet extractors. That's something you only see on lab equipment and stuff like that. And some of the options, now we can get. Again, I mentioned Amburana wood, which is kind of admittedly, it's a little bit of a hipster thing right now. I'm not going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
But who would have thought 5 years ago that you could get, Amburana wood, that you could call someplace and get this weird exotic Brazilian oak that does crazy shit that nobody's ever seen before.
Right.
There's and it works in a way that no other oak does. It's one of the very few where you can use an alternative, where you can use chips and get a good result, as opposed to using a barrel. It's there's just so much cool stuff that can be done, and so many things too. Everything old is new again. There's so many of these ideas. You go through the old 1800s distilling books, even going back to the Aqua Vitae treatises, and you pull out some of these crazy things and you look at them and you go, yeah, why wouldn't I? Why would I not do that?
Yeah, the only thing I would say to your thought about the moonshiners being the future in distilling is somebody needs to teach somebody how to cut.
You're not wrong. When I say moonshiners, I mostly mean home distillers. The home distillers need to double distill, and they need to learn their cuts. I'm sorry. Okay.
And I believed I could do a great whiskey, single pot, low and slow. And I'm going to tell you, man, it is a unicorn.
I still run into it a lot. I have people right now that I've been doing some consulting for, and they have that thought, and it's hard to get them past that thought, and even if you can do it on a keg still, doesn't mean that it's going to translate when you get up to 500-600 gallons.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I just think they need to trust. I mean, I didn't trust it. I thought, when somebody once told me I was stupid, I said, well, you're an asshole. I was the typical response that you have to your belief system. And I'm telling you, man, the belief is wrong. You can't do low and slow. I'll tell you, you cannot. And pot still produces a better whiskey than column. I know you've been generous. You've been generous with the argument, but you just can't do it, man. You lose so much, and you lose it in the fusel oils. When you separate out the oils, you lose the mouthfeel, and you lose the complexity of the whiskey. So
I'm not, and you know that I'm not a fan of low rec column, and it has its place for commodity whiskey, but that's where it's at, in my opinion. It's commodity whiskey stuff, and that's fine. You can do that, but
so the future,
for me, I'm always going to be a pot still guy. Always.
The future will be pot still, and the future will be alternative grains. And it'll be listening to your bartenders, looking for those complex components to do their mixology. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not a mixed drinker. I mean, to be honest, if a highball is about as mixed a drink as I'm going to go,
Right.
But the people that come into that bar want something different. They want blends. They want to do what are their mixology, and you got to listen to your bartenders. Your bartenders is doing what they want. So.
Yeah, the market will bear out exactly what works and what doesn't. And I think Kevin will enjoy this as well, being the host of the show that he is. So my opinion is right now where we're at with craft whiskey is exactly where we were with music whenever the grunge scene started to come in and take out hair metal. That's exactly where we're at, right? People want something ugly. They want something real. They want something they can connect with. And that's what us craft distillers do,
So what's the analog to whiny rock in whiskey?
That's a great show, actually. Is you take a bunch of alternative bands and then you figure out which distillery is which band, right? I have a feeling that for me, with Spirits of French Lick, like we're not one of the big ones. We're like Mudhoney or something, right? maybe we're lucky enough to be the meat puppets.
The meat.
So,
all right. All right. We're kind of winding things down a little bit, but one question I want to ask both of you is, from the conversation that we had tonight, what did you learn? Is there something that you'll walk away after this is done and you're laying in bed tonight and you're thinking, okay, that was something new for me? What would that be?
I'm not going to fuck with triticale whiskey of its own accord, because I tell you right now that shit was good, and there ain't no way 100% triticale that if I did it on my own is going to turn out like that. And I'll tell you right now, if I made something that was 100% triticale, that's what I'd be putting up against, and I'd just constantly be going, yeah, you fucked that up.
There is another distillery up here, and Kevin, I recommend you reach out to them. It's Alchemy Distillery over in Humboldt County, and Bohannon's, I believe, is their last name, and they're both husband and wife distilling team. They do a great job, and they do a triticale. They call it Serial Killer, and they do an excellent whiskey. It would have been nice if I should have thought about it, jump on it sooner. We could have substituted for the distiller, but they do a good job, and they're a very small operation, but they do great stuff.
Yeah, I remember meeting those guys years ago when they first got started. I'd just gotten hired at Copper and Kings, and they came into Moonshine University, I think, and stopped by Copper and Kings. And I don't know that I ever got to try any of their stuff, but they were nice people, and they seemed to know what they were doing and be very passionate. So
They are. So they do they have a farmer that grows it for them locally in Humboldt County, which trying to grow grain in Humboldt County must be like, trying to grow anything it's a rainforest over there. So I don't know how they get away with it, but
well, you got to say that cropland for everything else too, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's definitely not the cash crop of Humboldt County. Yeah.
No. Yeah, I mean, I can imagine if I was a distiller in Humboldt County, it'd probably be exactly what folks think, and then maybe a few wormwood plants on the side.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing. I absolutely need that boiler from Mr. Rick Gibson so that we can actually go into production on our absinthe. This is crazy, man. I'm going
Rick
nuts.
Gibson, you are holding up America's first modern day rice-based absinthe.
Yep.
I don't know how you can sleep at night. It's unacceptable, Rick.
One of my shareholders is Sicilian, so I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying? I think it's going to be a North Georgia visit here shortly.
Right. Right.
We're going to stick him into the 100-gallon mash tun and ship his ass out of here.
What's funny is I guarantee you that Rick is not watching this right now, but somebody knows Rick is watching this. And as soon as we get off here, I'm getting a phone call. It's gonna start with UMFer. That's how it starts every time.
Yeah. No, he even took shit from my wife the other day. She even she even started poking at him. So,
right. Well, listen, here's all you got to say. Here's how you solve the problem. I mean, honestly, Rick, I love you, buddy. You make awesome equipment. You have reinvented the multiple retort still in a way that makes sense in modern times. But Sean Rigsby is selling more equipment than you right now. Flatlander, a dude from Ohio who is on Master Distiller and is on TikTok with like 100 million followers or whatever Rigsby's got going on.
Right.
Are you really going to let Sean whip you at this, Rick? Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, just put it in the crate. It's already made.
Right.
It's already made. I mean, I saw it 2 years ago. All you have to do is ship
it. He's holding up the Barkart Absinthe show. Now,
he is.
Who doesn't want to see that?
This stuff
I want to see that.
Tell you, the stuff that we did off the current system is great, but it's only a 16-gallon thumper. You got 6 gallons that are sucked up into the system. It doesn't produce a lot. If you get 4 gallons out of the system, you've really maxed out. And the point is, we need this 100-gallon, boiler to make this thing work. So he's killing it.
The other side of this also as well too, Chris, that Rick Gibson could realize here is, I'm always trying to bring that moonshine aesthetic into the commercial distilling aesthetic is, you got Todd Leopold with a 3-chamber. 3 chambers, cool. It's very cool, but it's not as visual. It's not as visual as a Tennessee Thumper. I'm throwing that out there for Rick Gibson. You could be right up there with Vendome right now. You could be there with the big boys.
Yeah.
If you would just ship the equipment to Kris Koenig so he could make this absinthe.
That's it. Or we send the Sicilian. Just saying. It's going to be, I don't know if you've been looking at all as the water goes down Lake Powell, they keep finding bodies in barrels in Lake Powell, There might be a Georgia Lake coming up, you know what I'm saying?
So
here's a question for you, Kevin.
yes.
Did you learn anything?
Oh, I learned a lot. I learned a whole lot. I learned that there needs to be a hazmat apple brandy barrel shipped to Chico, California, and Spokane, Washington.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
And
maybe there ought to be a blend between the three.
I think the rice and the apples definitely a no-brainer.
That is something that would be coveted by many. And the other thing was because Alan, the kasha and buckwheat that you used in the Morning Glory is already a secondary grain.
Mm-hmm.
I would be interested to see how the secondary grain of the triticale or the rice, how that would be used in something that you might do, or if could you use the rice and the triticale together in a mash bill?
So, and I'll just throw this out as a theoretic, and obviously I defer to Kris and Don on that. But my brain immediately goes to, if I were going to pursue any kind of project like that, other than a blend between the three of us, I would probably use that Lee Sinclair mash bill. And honestly, I would probably use the potato corn, the bright orange high carotenoid corn, as the base. So 60% that high carotenoid corn. I'd probably switch out the oats for the rice, the wheat for the triticale. But then what I might come back and do is do oat malt instead of a honey malt or caramel malt.
Yeah. I don't know that Lee Sinclair would be the same without the oat.
Yeah, you got to have the oats in there, but I think switching it to malted and maybe roasting it a little bit or something might be fun, right? And that's where you have to find the right players in the game. But I certainly think with that sort of umami thing that Kris's rice whiskey has going on, and then also that kind of grains of paradise thing that is going on with Don's triticale, I think you could do something pretty cool with it. And then picking the right yeast, I might go the exact opposite of what I do with Lee Sinclair. I'd probably go with this is very distilling geekery here, but there's a yeast called Bee Fruits, and I've only ever used it for rum, actually, but you can drop it to 57 degrees and just let it crawl, and it's a 3-week fermentation. But I'd really try to hit those fruity sort of characteristics, that umami characteristic, and that grains of paradise, and bring it out as much as what I possibly could. The other side of that is maybe hit it with Kvike yeast and ferment it at 105 degrees and really push those tropical tones super hard with it.
Well, send me some, because we do, we're coming into summer. We can do 110, buddy, all day long and night.
Yeah, man. If you've not played with Kvike yet, there's a ton of Kvike strains out there, and if you've not played with them yet, that is so. Everybody talk. And obviously, and this might be a good place to kind of wrap up the official conversation, Kevin. But everybody currently is talking about alternative grain. We've gotten lucky enough that we've got craft distillers to this point where we are talking alternative grain, whether it be heirloom or just different types of grain. The next frontier, not to sound all Star Trekky, is yeast.
Yep.
That's really where things get super interesting. Is not only do I have this unique grain, but here's this unique yeast that does very strange things with this unique grain. And you can really start honing in on these ideas of a very regionalized, very culturally specific whiskey sort of thing, where hopefully eventually, you're gonna have people literally travel the entire, not only U.S. but the world for whiskey in time, and that's what you want. You want to have something that makes them want to come to you, right?
Right.
Yeah. Robert McDonald's in the chat on Facebook, and he said naked oats and purple barley.
Purple barley, yeah, purple straw barley. I've actually got a little bit of that growing in the garden right now, and I played with it in sugar shine before, but I've never cereal mashed it. I couldn't tell you enough about how it affects the flavor profile, but it's certainly, I'm all for seeing more of those old barley varieties, and especially rye, come to the forefront. So, Kris, I have a question for you, actually. So you guys do the Cal Rose rice?
Yep.
Are there any other varieties of rice, or any, let's say specifically heirloom varieties of rice, that you're interested in, or something that you might want to pursue in the future?
Well, I would. The issue comes, accessibility, because we are just dominated by Cal Rose here. I mean, it's either Cal Rose or it's a non-GMO rice. I mean, those are the two strains that we have a choice on. As far as, don't misquote me on there, 1,600 varieties of rice in the world. I'm going to guess. I think that number's in my head. I could be off, plus or minus 10,000. Who knows? So there's a lot of options there for someone to look at rice. And of course, most home distillers do the jasmine to understand what passes through, and it's the worst distillate you could have.
Burnt butterscotch.
But it's a great way for you to realize what does pass over in distillation. But, I think right now we have a great grain here, and there's just still so much stuff that's untested. I mean, we still have a lot of stuff to do here in the distillery just with that grain before we start jumping off and chasing something else. But I do encourage anybody to go find a strain of rice and run with it. Because it's great stuff. Now, I was joking here. Emily's saying something about fava beans. I'm Portuguese too, so I understand this. We are going to do that in a port finish. We've determined that instantly in the conversation because we also do grappa here, and this year's grappa is going to be finished in a port finish. We're aging it right now with some used cues from port. So. I mean, that's a great thing about, being a small distillery. You can do shit. Yeah. You don't need to get corporate approval to spend X number of dollars to run this experiment. You just look at it one morning and go, what do you think, guys? And there's you and your two assistant distillers, and everyone goes, oh, yeah, let's do it.
Tuesday and I'm bored. That's what that is. Tuesday and I'm bored. Let's do that. Yeah, real quick, I can testify to your grappa. It's fantastic. Also, for other distillers out there, especially on the East Coast or in the Midwest or in the South, Robert McDonald is an excellent source for grain. He does have some really cool heirloom corn varieties, including my Amanda Palmer, and then he's also growing some rosin rye for the Laura Petruzio. I can't ever think of the Fields Foundation, Delaware Valley Fields Foundation, I believe is what it's called. So bringing back Pennsylvania heirloom rye.
That's great. Yeah, he does great work. So, all right. Anything else, guys?
No, man. Just thank you for having me on, and thanks for doing this. I think the more we talk about alternative grains and processes and yeast, and trying to attack the problem from a different angle is only going to help the industry. And I think we're all tired of drinking the same stuff. And that's the light at the end of the tunnel that we provide, is that there will be something out there in 2 or 3 years, 4 years, 12. That's just not Kentucky. And I love everybody in Kentucky. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
I am a huge fan, and my collection's a couple hundred bottles of the stuff. But at some point, we want something different.
Yeah. Well, ain't it fun to be the guy that makes people scratch their head and go, "Huh,
maybe."
Right?
On that, man. We'll see.
But the problem is distribution.
Yep.
Okay. And being able to get all of the unique things that somebody may be doing in California or Washington State or Michigan or wherever, Maine, it's difficult for people all across the country to get that.
So
Now-
I'll give you the 30-second dump on the gatekeepers. Okay, because you've lifted up a rock, buddy, and there's a bunch of shit on the bottom of the rock. Okay, but I will give you from my perspective. You can't get past the gatekeepers because what we're doing is so different and so unique. They don't have faith that we know what we know and that we're pushing the envelope and we're in the right direction, because they are so traditional bourbon drinkers or traditional whiskey drinkers that they're not going to take a chance, even if they think that they're on the cutting edge. They're like, well, I'm not sure about this,
Yep.
And instead of becoming advocates for new and different, because they're afraid of losing their customer, not their customers, but their wholesaler base or their other distillers. And so we run into that. And then three-tiered itself needs to go away. Sorry, it's antiquated, not necessary in this day and age. There's enough systems for the government to make sure no one's screwing them over on the taxes, and let us loose, please. We're fighting direct to consumer here in the U.S. or in California, SB 620, and is the bill great for craft distillers? Yes. Is it great for distillers in general? No. And the point is why should there be a choice? Why should we be straddled with these archaic rules and well, it can only be union this, and it can only be you can't use contract deliverers. Well, so then you just shut out 2/3 of the delivery system in America. I mean, how is that American?
Right.
I support union, but come on. The reality is not everything's unionized. But to throw this into a bill on craft distillers to have the opportunity to ship direct is crap. And I just really think that we need to, and I'm saying we as a community, the craft distillers really need to start rattling the cage.
Yeah.
And are the big guys going to benefit from it? Sure. We expect that because it's fucking America. Excuse my language. It's America. We expect everybody to have the same equal opportunity. Right. So please give that to me. Get rid of the three-tiered system, or modify the three-tiered system enough that we can get access to the markets, so we don't have to worry about the gatekeepers who say, well, that's just not a traditional bourbon. Of course it's not a traditional bourbon. I'm trying to give your customer something different.
Right.
And I'll add to that real quick. My problem, through either luck or talent, and I'll leave that up to the viewer to decide which one it is a supply issue. We're not big enough to do what we would like to do and what we potentially could do. We're basically a 10-state brand, and that's what we're going to be. And then maybe, also Canada. But I agree with you 100%. When it comes to new distillers coming in and people that are doing good stuff, the three-tier system screws them. There's also this interesting thing that happens in the United States where everything is sort of so kind of segregated, where, the East Coast has its kind of thing going on, the Northeast, and then Midwest and the South, and then West Coast. And it comes all the way down to even competitions, right? I can tell you, based on where the judges are from in a competition, how well my whiskey is going to do, right? Typically, if we have West Coast judges, our stuff fails terribly. It fails miserably because it's so far out of the normal norm for what they have, right? If we have East Coast judges, we do great. Midwest and South, we do great, right? But I do everything I can as a distiller in the states that we're in. If another distiller calls me and goes, hey, who do I need to talk to in this state? I will gladly tell you. I've also, the three-tier system, and I'm not saying I've ever done anything illegal, quote unquote. There's ways to deal with the three-tier system. And I've gotten myself in trouble in the past by doing that. But if I think it's for a distiller that's worth it, I help that distiller, and I will give them all the help that I can and put them directly in contact with the person they need to talk to beyond just a distributor to get them into the system, because I feel like they've earned it, right? And if they don't have somebody to go to bat for them and to take that heat, they may never get in front of that person, ever.
Well, I appreciate the call, man. It's very frustrating. It is just, it's incredibly frustrating that, we have been jerked around the last 2 years with being able to ship direct And we started building up a little bit of thing. And then the governor says, "Oh, can't do it anymore because we're going to remove the COVID thing." And then we're dealing with this bill that just continues to morph every time it goes into any committee. It morphs again. I mean, we're going to enjoy it. Sure. We're going to take it. Sure. Because it's just like any time that your rights are diminished and they get a little bit of it back, are you going to say no? Of course not. You're going to take your rights back. Mm-hmm. So we'll take what we'll get, but it's still not right.
Right.
It's not right. So.
Right. You should be able to access the free market system.
Absolutely. And right now, 3-tiered system creates a restriction of trade, and it actually steps on my civil rights to be able to access the market.
Right. And for the market to be able to access you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because somebody listening to this, podcast wants to buy a bottle of whiskey tomorrow. There's no options. Mm-hmm. There's no options for them to come and get a bottle.
There's a lot of sales guys out there listening to this or going to be listening to this, just getting the cold chills going. I just get incentive, guys. I just get incentive.
Yeah.
Tell your company to pay you better. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Anyway, that's
right.
I got off the soapbox. It was a great podcast up to that point.
No, it was fantastic comment, and we've got Memorial Day coming up, so we ought to be able to talk about the freedoms that we should all be able to enjoy in the United States of America. One of which is buying what whiskey you want from where you want, when you want.
Exactly.
And everybody should pee off the lighthouse in Key West at least once. Just saying.
I'm going to take your ass down there. We're going to watch this. I want to hope you doing it.
All right. Well, on behalf of Don and Kris and Alan, I want to thank everybody that tuned in tonight. The video of this will be available to watch on the Bar Cart Co-op YouTube channel. So you can tune into this anytime, and we'll share this on all of our social media. And before we tune out, Kris, tell people where they can find you on social.
Social is Golden Beaver Distillery on both Facebook and Instagram. And then direct contact me is Kris, spelled with a K, at goldenbeaverdistillery.com.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Alan?
I don't have any of the social media for Spirits of French Lick memorized, but it's spiritsofFrenchlick.com. You can also find our stuff on Sillbox.com, which ships to multiple states. You can check me out on Distillers Talk. You can also check out my various social media, where I'm currently doing little 10-minute videos about distilling, both on a amateur and professional level. Mm-hmm. And then the next big thing, for those that are still watching live, June the 11th at Springville State Park in southern Indiana and Lawrence County, Mitchell, Indiana, we are doing a Indiana Craft Distilling Festival to celebrate the reopening of the Daisy Spring Mill Distillery, which the state of Indiana is reopening as a functional distillery sometime in the next year or so to make historic style spirits in the pre-prohibition style of southern Indiana using historic methodology. There will be multiple distilleries there: Spirits of French Lick, Donham Day, Hard Truth. I believe MGP just signed up for it. I don't want to say all the distilleries because I don't know for sure. I think they're now up to maybe 9 or 10. Mm-hmm. Should be a good time for everybody involved. I will be in the distillery that day talking about historic distillation, potentially doing a mash-in and that sort of thing. I real quickly want to throw out that the Alan Bishop Experience documentary, which is somehow a functional documentary that actually exists out of multiple instances of just drunken stupidity that Bo Cumberland filmed, is coming up and will be available for streaming and also at different premieres shortly this summer. So I think that kind of sums up what I've got going on.
That's a lot. For myself, you can find me at Bourbon Turntable on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google. Like I said earlier, we've got a show that's coming out tomorrow. We're going to do a review of the Black Keys' new album, so you'll be able to listen to that and see which of those songs really pisses me off. And you'll be able to hear us talk about a couple of new ryes that we were tasting as well. So check out Bourbon Turntable. I'd appreciate it. And subscribe to the Bar Cart channel on YouTube. and the page on Facebook, because we're going to have more of these kind of things going on for you. It's things where we do a really great deep dive, and we have fantastic guests like Kris and Don tonight. So until next time, whenever that may be, cheers and happy birthday, Bob Dylan.
Happy birthday, Bob.
Who died years ago.
Oh.
Good night.
Bye, guys.